Welcome to the HMO Property Podcast, where we connect, educate, and inspire the UK's HMO property community. So stop what you're doing, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. What's up, HMO Nation, and welcome to another episode of the HMO Property Podcast with me, Rupert Wallace. In this episode, we interview successful HMO property investor, Mike Frisby. Mike's going to take us on his HMO property investment journey, including the ups, the downs, the highs, and the lows. Mike's been investing in HMOs for some 12 years now. He's completed over 50 projects, currently houses 300 tenants in 4 different locations. So let's jump straight in. Mike, say hello.
Hello, everyone.
Now, before we dive into the details of HMOs, tell us about yourself, Mike. Give us your background before you started your HMO journey.
Okay, so before I was in property at all, I was in the corporate world. So I did business studies at university, and then went into marketing and strategy for large FMCG, that's consumer goods companies with some famous brands. So I was lucky enough to work on brands like Guinness. Then I worked for Unilever, and I worked on brands like Dove, Lynx, and did a bit of work all around the world. So that was quite interesting.
And how long were you doing that?
In all, probably about 12 years in itself. But it was when I was in the corporate world, I started dipping my toe in the whole property market. I wanted to run my own business. Sort of the drive was business. I also like property, and I thought you could make money out of property. So I just started dipping my toe in it while I was in the corporate world.
And what age did you leave the corporate world?
Well, I've been it was in my 30s, so I think early 30s. I'm trying to remember now. It's it was in my 30s. As these things go, there's always change within the corporate world. I mean, there's one constant in life, and to me, and that is change. So you've got to get used to change. But that's what annoyed me, is because you'd be doing certain things, you'd be heading down a track, and then all of a sudden, the organisation, no fault of your own, would change. And also, I ended up in quite a global role, quite a strategic role. And there you're looking so far out that really just felt disconnected a bit, because you do something or work on something for a while, and of course it wouldn't come to fruition for years, and they might change their mind. And as I said, I had an entrepreneurial drive. I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet. I wanted to make an impact and be rewarded for my effort, or if I failed, be able to take responsibility for that.
Absolutely. Nothing feeling like being held back, eh?
Yeah, I think it's more of being justly rewarded if you do well. Always inside of me, there's been that entrepreneurial spirit. From a young age, I wanted to run my own business, partly for the monetary, but partly just because I wanted to do that. That was just the lifestyle I wanted. I wanted to be in control, I guess. Not that I'm a control freak at all, but it sounds as though it could be, but it more is just, and I think there's a trend currently within the country of people having to take a slightly more responsibility. So maybe I was ahead of the curve. I don't know. Mike,
thanks for your background. Tell us how you got into the world of HMO property investment.
Yeah, so it was almost by accident that I bought my first HMO, and probably I wouldn't have known the term HMO at that stage. So my very first HMO was a student HMO, and I'd come across this landlord that was looking to sell up, and he had single lets and he had some student lets. So part of the portfolio that I bought, I ended up doing a deal with him, had some student lets. So that really was my first introduction to HMOs. I think student lets are the easy end of HMOs in some respects, because you have one contract, so it's not hugely different. Obviously, you still have to have certain criteria in terms of the regulations and the fire alarm systems and those things. But you must remember this was 12 years ago, so licensing wasn't really that common. In fact, it wasn't around. I remember HMO licensing coming in. So for those of you who are like going, "Oh my God, HMO licensing," when I first started, there wasn't such a thing. So it just shows you how old I am.
And tell us, what year did you buy your first HMO then?
Oh, it must have been probably 2007, something like that, I think.
Great. Okay. And was anything holding you back getting into HMOs at the time?
Well, as I said, it was more of an accidental thing in terms of buying an HMO for students. So there was nothing really holding me back. I mean, it was more, I just went into it as part of my property journey. They paid good income. So that was they were the jewels in the crown of the portfolio, really. But then after that, I didn't really do any more HMOs after that for a while, because it was sort of, I bought them by accident, and the area I bought them was quite expensive. So it was quite hard to buy further ones. I looked at a few. I remember now I looked at a few because I thought these are good, these will work. But it was the price point that was probably holding me back, because a little bit more expensive, because you needed bigger properties than, say, the average property.
Got it. Okay. Now just go into a bit more detail about your very first HMO deal. What it was exactly. I know you said it was a student one. How many bedrooms? Did you do any work to it? Purchase price? Give us a flavour.
Oh, okay. So no, I did know. I came with tenants in. It was the easiest thing going. So it's not very exciting, really, in some respects. But I bought three of them pretty much at once. As I said, it was part of a portfolio deal. So for a while, I was doing deals with portfolios. So, you hear these days of talking about landlord letters and things. This was me dealing direct with a landlord that I came across and buying a portfolio off him, just as you would hear today. So that, this strategy is not new. I think a lot of people go, "Oh my God, all these registers, it's new." If you can find the landlords and you can deal with them, people wanting to exit, then that's a really good strategy. So I came across this portfolio landlord, and we negotiated a deal. I spent quite a lot of time negotiating the deal. The properties were in reasonable condition. He'd gone through and renovated them, and they came with tenants in. So it's the easiest thing going.
Perfect. Tell us some numbers.
So in terms of numbers, I think I bought them for around 250. So I had three of them, and I think they were all. One was 260, one was 265, and another one was 265. I'm trying to remember the rents now because it's so long ago, but I had two of them had 4 people in and one had 5 people in. And they were students, so I didn't pay the bills. So I think they were about 1,800 or something like that. So they're not mega cash flowing at that point in time, but I still hold them today. They've gone up in value a lot. They've added 200,000 across the value. And the rent's gone up, and I've still got the original mortgages I purchased on, so my mortgages are next to nothing. So
is this back in the good old days of 100% financing 12 or so years ago?
Financing. I mean, to be honest, this was another thing I actually took out, and people would have said I was nuts or against the HMOs because they had the cash flow. I could actually get 90% mortgages, so I got a 90% mortgage against these properties. They're lowly geared at the moment. As we look into the future, because they were in a strong position in the south, they're actually in Guildford. And the market's been strong. There's tenants just fall over. Even today, because the location is absolutely amazing. I think the last time I let them out, some of the tenants didn't even bother to go and look at it because they were just so desperate, and they looked like the photos. And
perfect.
So it was the easiest thing going, and I've never had a problem. They would be my best purchases, to be honest. Probably the best purchases going because it was easy, 90% mortgage, so I didn't have to put loads down, despite the purchase price. There was a bit of stamp to pay, but that was it, really.
Excellent. The first ones are the best.
Sometimes,
okay.
Yeah, and without realising, sometimes I think. But some people get so hung up on their first, and you could almost say I wasn't hung up at all and just got on with it. And that would be my advice to people: really, just get on with it and learn through the process.
Yeah, do you know what? Actually, some of my first purchases have also been the best. The accidental HMO landlord is a powerful thing. Mike, tell us how investing in HMOs has changed your life.
Yeah, I mean, what that's really done is it's given me the income. Okay, when I first started out, I did quite a few single lets and some renovations and those kind of things, and they make money, but they've made better money over time. But they really, I find single lets just don't make enough money, and you would need loads and loads and loads of them. Whereas HMOs, they can give you some good cash flow. They can, what I've also do very successfully is recycle my investment out fairly quickly. So that allows me to continue to purchase, whereas again, even on a single let, that might be difficult. So, what it's done is really set me up, to allow me to do what I want to do. So these days, I make the choices on what I want to do. I'm an entrepreneur. I love it. So I'm still heavily involved in business and all of those aspects. But it's allowed me to focus on the areas that I prefer to focus on rather than the bits and bobs that I don't need to do, and set up teams and employ people and do all of those things that actually gets me out of the business as well.
So pretty life-changing, you would say.
Yeah, and it's been in terms of cash flow and in terms of the way forward, in terms of knowing what your income is every month. It's the HMOs that have done that. It's not necessarily the single lets, because they're just a few hundred. It's not big. It's not impactful. I live in the south. It's expensive here.
It is expensive. If you can make HMOs work in the south, you're doing very well.
Yeah.
Mike, next up, what's your favorite part of HMO property investing? What's the favorite part?
I love the bit where we find a deal and then I'm working out what to do it, the best layouts, how to construct a deal. So, I mean, we talked a bit about, I found that landlord, I negotiated a fairly creative deal to buy a portfolio. That's one of my skills, doing some creative deals. But it's that whole thing of just trying to work out how to make money on it. And I think one of my skills is to find areas where other people don't necessarily see, whether it's a creative buying process, whether it's a certain layout, whether it's adding value in a certain way. So it's those kind of things, especially these days. I do some lumpy, HMOs, some
bigger stuff.
Yeah. And those, other people don't see the value that I see. And that to me is where I can pick up deals where others don't see deals.
Got it. Perfect. Mike, so we've talked about your past, but before we move on to the present and your future plans in HMO property, let's take a minute to thank our sponsor.
Are you looking for an effortless HMO mortgage experience? If that's a yes, there's only one place to go: www.thehmomortgagebroker.co.uk, the UK's #1 specialist HMO mortgage broker. They're so specialised that they don't do anything else. HMO mortgages, HMO remortgages, and HMO bridging. That's it. They have access to every HMO lender out there, and even some exclusive products not available to other brokers. With lightning fast service and A1 communication, they're easily the best HMO broker in town. So to experience HMO lending made easy, go to www.thehmomortgagebroker.co.uk today.
Mike, fast forwarding to the present day, tell us about your portfolio, what it consists of, where it is, how many tenants, how many properties. Go into a bit more detail.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I probably have different metrics to most people. So a lot of people say, how many properties and things. I just don't count it on property basis. And again, I'll even challenge people, say, what is a property? Some of my HMOs, they have, I'd call them merged lines. Are they HMOs? Are they individual flats? Yes, I might need licenses for them for HMOs, but, I call them micro units. Some of my HMOs are fully self-contained.
Yeah.
And some are, almost, self-contained. So I don't see that as, is it how many mortgages? Is it so? I know that's a bit confusing for people, and that's why when people say, how many properties do you own? I just don't look at it like that, and I'm not that particularly interested.
Tell us your metrics.
So my metrics is more about units, and that's where the 300 plus units come in. So I might buy a block with 14 units in. Some of them might be self-contained, some of them might be sharing facilities. So I also these days have units where I have mixed, for example, one of the projects I've just finished has got 2 flats on the ground floor, and the 2 upper floors is an HMO, so it's 6-bed HMO, and one of the flats is two beds. So that might be it. In terms of where are they, and I have HMOs, moving from the simple, probably my smallest, what I'd call smallest HMO. Do I have a 3-bed? I think I probably have 3 people in my smallest HMO, and
is that an HMO?
Yeah, so I was trying to work out, is that an HMO or not HMO? I would define it as an HMO, and obviously, I operate predominantly in an area where there is Article 4, so obviously I need a different planning situation for that property. So definitely, in my view, an HMO. Moving all the way up to 25 units. So that's what I've got as well. So a variety of HMOs. The sweet spot of HMO sizes that I quite like, because they're quite simple. We can just do our cookie cutter model, is the 6-7 bed. 6-bed, 6 en suites, probably one of my favorite, because it's quite profitable.
Keep it simple, yeah.
And it's fairly simple. You're not overloading it with tenants. That a lot of people get attracted by the bigger stuff, and obviously I do a lot of bigger stuff, but there's a lot of you do have to have a lot of watch outs on the bigger stuff, whereas the smaller stuff is simple. You can sell on simpler, all of these types of things. I just like the challenge of the big ones, really.
Yeah, the big ones are also mega cash flows. We all know that.
Yeah, I didn't want to say that, but
20 beds and above is definitely worth aiming for.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the thing, and then they're long term, and also you've got quite a concentration within one area, which is quite nice, and it's easier to manage. The more you get, I'm starting to look at blocks and those kind of things is easier. So I quite like those for simplistic reasons as well. So I kind of moved on a little bit to looking at what criteria makes my life simple, as well as obviously what makes money. I don't want to do a highly complex, highly problematic property to manage, because if you keep it for the long term, that's a lot of years that you've got to manage that. I don't mind complex refurbs. That's okay, because that's a short period of time, and I'm used to them. And in some ways they're quite exciting, because you're going to have some challenges along the way, and you might call me mad, but that's what the entrepreneur likes to almost do, is to get over those challenges.
Absolutely. That's one of the satisfying parts of the job, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, definitely.
We found with the the 6 beds are great, but in terms of economies of scale and economies of time, especially, the 10 beds and above are where you make your real wins, because it takes about the same amount of time to manage a 10 bed or a 6 bed as it does to manage a 20 bed, or it's certainly not 3.5 times or 3 1/3 times as much management time.
That's exactly it, and that's why I'm now looking at larger units, because of Mike's time input. I have to input into a project, maybe a bit more on a bigger project, because obviously the numbers are bigger, so I want to double check that a bit more. But certainly on a management front, or certainly on a as you say, number of property front, one property versus although in the bigger ones obviously you do have complexes in terms of boilers and water in, water out types of problems that can be a bit tricky. So and a lot of people living in the same space can be tricky as well, but as you say, certainly not you don't multiply up. In fact, my 3-bed, just because the type it is and where it is, it's not in the best of areas, it's quite old, and actually my tenant type for that, because it's old and in not necessarily the best of areas, is actually benefit tenants. So they're it's not that they're difficult, it's just obviously collecting benefits, working with the benefit system, it can be complex. They're moving from benefits to universal credits, and just doing all of that stuff just timely, and you just go, well, it's not really, for a 3-bed, that's not really worth it in this day and age for us.
So Mike, I talked about metrics. We talked about the metrics of your units, about 300 odd. Tell us gross cash flow, if you don't mind.
Well, our rent roll is over $1 million a year. I mean, I don't like talking too much about figures because I think everyone's sort of so we have a seven figure income out of the portfolio. So we have an 8-figure portfolio with a 7-figure income is what I like to say. People, I know it's vague, but I just think that's lots of different people sort of look into things. So for me, that's just how it is. It's not, I don't, again, some people, you say, oh, it's a big ego thing if you start talking too much about numbers. So that's
we understand.
Not necessarily style, if you see what I mean.
Next up, talk to us about your best HMO investment to date, for whatever reason, financial, social, enjoyment factor. Just tell us about your best HMO investment.
Ooh, I guess there's been a couple that spring to mind quite well, but one of the things that I like, one of the ones I like is because I quite like the design of it, quite like the feel of it, and and the numbers worked as well. So it's the combination of both, which is a 9-bed that I have, large property, bought it off, and it's deceased estate, so they owned a few. I bought 2 off them. That one and another one, and this just worked well. It's got really nice big rooms, so it just has a nice feel to it because it's a good style, it's good decoration, but also the rooms are really nice and big, so the tenants like it. It's 9 beds, 9 bathrooms, so all but one is en suite. So there's one with an off suite, but pretty much exclusive. You've got a nice space for utilities. It's got a lounge area. It's got a big kitchen area. It's got a diner. You've got double doors going onto the garden. So it just has, for me, it has a nice feel. And actually, to this day, I wander in there, and the tenants keep it really well. I occasionally take people in on a tour or something like that, and people are like, "Have you just had the cleaners in?" I says, "No, these tenants keep it this way." It is. I have to say, it's not always the case with HMOs, but and obviously we've had different tenants come and go, but they just keep that property, so it just has a nice, just a nice feel to it, and the numbers were really good as well. And I know you're going to probably ask me those in a moment, but so I'm just trying to rack my head as to exactly what they are.
Yeah, why not? What did you buy it for? What did it revalue?
Yeah, essentially we bought it for $330. And it's one of those properties that when you go out and buy, it was a big property and it was worth that for us. But because it was such a property, actually the valuer downvalued it from what we bought it for $330, and we were hoping for, and I think we managed to chip a bit of a price off because of the fact that I think we'd agreed a bit more than that. I can't remember the exact figures because it is a little while ago. And therefore the mortgage, the mortgage that we were getting wasn't the full 75%. So I had to put a little bit more money than I anticipated in because I thought this is still going to be a good project. But it ended up valuing up, I think, at 650 at the end. So the post refurb at 650. So when we valued it at the end, 650. So that was a good, that's a good gain. We did spend quite a bit of money on it, 120 to get it there. But you can do the maths there, can't you? 330 plus 120. Obviously, there's stamp and that kind of stuff, but
a couple of $100,000 minus the change.
Yeah,
in uplift. That's a great project.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. One great success. That one really good example. Next up, tell us about one significant mistake that you've made in your HMO business that you think by sharing you might help others avoid.
Ooh, one significant mistake. Obviously, I've not been perfect. There's 2 areas that I would say that has been, one is refurbishments. You can get the budgeting wrong, and I'll be honest, I have once or twice got the budgeting wrong, and spent more than anticipated because I've missed something out, or I hadn't spotted something. So on some of the older properties, so for example, I've got quite an old property, and I probably didn't. So I bought it, I ran it for a while, and now all of a sudden, for example, I've got to redo the roof, and it just wasn't in my numbers. So I'm having to redo the roof out of my own pocket, and that's because you're not checking out I got probably a little bit too fixated with the creativity of the deal, and it was a great deal, and cash flows really well. So I'll soon get that money back, but because of that, I was probably focusing more on that rather than, okay, let's be really strict with all the maintenance that needs, the planned maintenance over time, because it wasn't a property that we were like going in completely renovating and putting back together. So maybe I was a bit over eager to do the deal as opposed to really look through as to what it might cost me over the next 5 years. So I think sometimes it's that, maybe under budgeting for the running costs over, a 5-year period. I'm fairly good at doing the actual refurb, but it's that kind of like, okay, there's a second wave that comes in terms of costs. And I guess initially I probably underestimated that. And the cycle, my view is the cycle is shorter in an HMO than it is in a single let. So if I look through, because I've been a landlord a while now, so the advantage that I've got is that I've been through, I would say there's an investment cycle that you need to make on properties, and after 12 years quite often you probably need to have done something to your properties, especially HMOs, because they're harder wearing. There's more traffic flow, there's more kind of things that you need to put back together again. So that side of it, I would say.
That's a good one for the audience, actually. The second wave of costs, that when you see a project and you finish a project, you don't quite think about the additional wear and tear on HMOs. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and also these days, because of the advantages I've got of being having been involved in the game now for a while, of course I build to make it look good, but I also build to make it last. So that learning has probably been built into some of my HMOs. So some people will come in and go, why have you done that? And it might not look as good as maybe the other alternative. And sometimes it might cost a little bit more, but what it is preventative as opposed to, having to problem solve later on. So for example, for the last few years, we've been putting in shower panels and things like that rather than tiles, because I find it's the grout that starts to not look 100% after several years. And therefore, that's what puts people off and those kind of things. Whereas panels are just wiped down. There's no grouting, that kind of stuff. So just little things like that can help you maintain that level, because again, you see all these pictures these days on Facebook of all these lovely HMOs, and I look at them sometimes going, that's not going to last, that's not going to last, that's not going to last. Might look good and you might get outstanding rents first time round, but again, once they've been lived in, do the rents drop slightly? I would say that they might do when it's not completely fresh. And then also, if these things aren't robust, you're having to replace them a lot quicker than you might have thought.
Yeah, and that obviously sometimes can cause voids, and the knock-on effect of that, you also forget to budget in when you first do the analysis sometimes. So yeah, everyone's a bit compounding.
Everyone's often optimistic. Yeah, and that's the thing. But the good thing about an HMO is the fact that you do actually have a little bit more cash floating around. I've seen people come unstuck with the whole single let thing because they just have had no cash floating around. They thought they were going to make a couple of hundred. You have a boiler go, depending on how much of the system you've got to replace, you're making a couple of hundred, bang, and then you've got a void for one void in a year.
You're
then
dead.
You get money out of it. Yeah, exactly. So at least through an HMO, it's got a bit of cash. As long as you're not relying on it totally, all of that cash come out. And again, and that would be another piece of advice is, say if you need 3,000 a month to leave your job, get 4 HMOs producing 4,000 a month, so you've got a bit of slush. So because otherwise, where does the give come? If all of a sudden it's not 3,000, you've got a few empty, or you've got a big problem somewhere. So, overstack before you jump out, have a look at what your true costs are. And I think that's what a lot of people don't do, is look at the true costs. They go, oh yeah, we get this in, we have this mortgage, we think the gas electric is this, but they're not counting the cleaning, the fact that you've got to do the gutters, the fact that you've got to do the garden, the fact that you've got to, you don't see that on many people's costs, the fact that you've got some voids. So that for me would be one of the biggest pieces of advice, drill down, and they do make a lot of money HMOs, and it's definitely worth the effort, but just be realistic. And once you've started running some for a while, have a look at what your P&Ls are, and have a look at what deal analyzer says, and see whether they're the same, because you should be changing your deal analyzer to reflect the true picture, not what you think it should be, the optimum rosy picture. I know sometimes people are like, oh yeah, but I'm conservative on it. I'd challenge them that they're probably not. And how many people actually go back and have a look at what actually happens after a few years and what they were looking at, because that helps you with your investments going forward to make better investments and getting higher productive HMOs moving forwards. It's just tweaking the system the whole time, So
with that in mind, Mike, tell us about your HMO portfolio plans for the next 12 months.
Yeah, I mean, we've had quite a hefty expansion process over the last few years. So we're just bedding down a little bit in terms of we're still expanding. So we'll do some bigger projects. So I don't want the volume of projects, but we'll probably add similar numbers of rooms, maybe slightly less than we have over the last couple of years. Just because we want to bed down, we want to, sometimes it's good to take stock in business. And also for me, I have quite a lot now, and it's like, what's the drive and what's the thing? So we've got other things that are priority in our business around the HMO arena, things like helping others out and, those kind of things that I also really, really enjoy. So for
perfect. That leads me on to I'll stop you there. That leads me on to my next question, Mike, about, is there anything outside building the HMO portfolio that you're up to in property that you think might be useful to share with HMO Nation?
Yeah, I mean, I help people, get going in HMOs, expand their portfolios, systemize their portfolios. So I do run some mentoring groups and help people. And that for me is something that I'm really, really enjoying at the moment, and really, enjoying the buzz of doing it and seeing people succeed. So, I've spent a bit of time working in, what bits of the business is, I think you started off, do I really, really enjoy? And it's actually the fact that I put up got so much knowledge. I've got so many years, done so many projects, sweated so many hard graft and dealing with the bad states, that I just want to help other people. And I think some of the rant that I said earlier, which is like, oh, people don't understand this and that, I don't want people to fall over. I want people to go into this eyes wide open and be really helped through the process. And a lot of it is there, debunking the myths. I spend a bit of time helping people understand commercial finance, because that's really worked for me so well, and I find everyone's confused. And I just like looking to see the look on people's faces when they understand some of the magic of that kind of stuff, and they're going, wow. So
that light bulb moment, isn't it?
Yeah, I've got a phrase for this year, which is creating a wow. I want to create as many wows as I can with the tenants and with the people that I help. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Excellent, love that. So any advice you'd give current HMO investors in the current climate?
Yeah, I mean, you start to hear people saying, is it saturated? Is it saturated? I still don't think the market's saturated. Obviously, have a look at your area, and it's down to the micro detail. So, you've got to get in and really understand an area. Also, I'm used to, I go back to the corporate world when I worked in personal care or stuff. I was selling shampoo. There's not suddenly more hair in the country, is there? It's like, there's only so much shampoo needs. It was a fully saturated market, but we used to compete against each other. So also think about it as can I compete against everybody else? Am I better than everyone else? Because if you're better than everybody else, you will meet the demand of the tenant, you will still be full. So it doesn't really matter whether it's fully saturated or not. Yes, that's going to maybe affect the rent slightly, but again, if you've got an amazing HMO, there's time and time again I see it where people really premiumize the market or have a certain niche in the market, and people are willing to pay for it. I mean, it's like, you could argue like it's a watch. Some watches go for hundreds of thousands, and you can also pick up a watch for £1 somewhere, probably in a pound shop. So is the watch market saturated? There's only a certain number of risks. Stop looking at it like that. Look at it as how every other commodity is out there, really. Yes, it's nice if it was a continually growing market, but just, we're still in this big time, and I still think there's huge demand, and I think there will be growing demand.
I agree with you. And how about any advice you'd like to give people who are looking to get into HMO property for the first time?
Yeah, I think seek advice and learn. There's many places that you do that, but don't be scared and take that move. And I think it's well worth it, but go in eyes wide. You don't have to rush in terms of build a massive portfolio initially. Do one, see how it all goes, learn from that. And then if you feel you want to do another, do another. I mean, I think sometimes everyone is in a rush to do property because they want to escape the job or do that. In the scheme of life, if it's an extra year it takes you because you want to learn and you don't want to muck up, I think that's fine. But don't procrastinate. That's not an excuse to procrastinate, which is what some people do, analysis by paralysis. There's never going to be a black and white situation. It just doesn't happen in life, does it? It's all shades of grey. You've got to use your own judgment, and that's where the advice and experience comes in to help you and cut through that and short circuit your journey. So, do the research, understand it all, but jump in 2 feet.
Brilliant. Finally, before we sign off, we'd like you to recommend one great HMO resource or book that you'd like to share. Then let HMO Nation know how they can connect with you, and then we'll say goodbye.
Okay. So I think that, there's some good online Facebook stuff and forums and knowledge around out there that I think will give you some value. I said go and learn and see what other people are doing. So just connect to people on social media who are doing HMOs. So go out and have a look, because they all post their projects and things, and then connect with them and actually probably private message them and see what time they can and have a coffee with them if you can, especially if they're in your local area. So do that and go on. There's often, we do tours, but there's loads of people around the country do tours that don't really cost that much. So that's always a really, really good experience. In terms of contacting us, I'm on social media. So I'm on Facebook, Instagram, frisby.mike, I think is my Instagram, LinkedIn, so all the social media. I also have a website, which is www.mikefrisby.co.uk. So Frisby is Frisby. So you can connect to me there. But just get out there and network and connect with people. There's nothing wrong with talking. Not just...
Property is a people's business. Mike, thank you for sharing your journey. We salute you. Let's get an HMO high five, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for joining us. If you've enjoyed this and want more informational, educational, and inspirational HMO property content, then please hit the subscribe button and give us a like. See you next time. This content was brought to you in association with HMOhub.co.uk, the UK's #1 HMO platform, connecting the HMO property community.